bring excellent programs like the one we're having today. We want to ask for people to make a donation. There's a basket there, and Meredith, if you would just start that and people can hand that through. And there's no dues or anything, but if you can make a donation that helps us pay the honoraria that we give to our speakers, which is not much, but we appreciate an hour of their time. Hopefully there'll be time for questions toward the end. So if you're on Zoom, we're going to try and do that through chat and have David Fike up in the booth relay the questions to us. If you have a question here, just raise your hand. And I would strongly adjure you to make your statement in the form of a question and not a position statement or a belief or whatever. So we're here to learn more about our speaker and her organization. So please form your comments in the form of a question. So with that, I'll introduce Bill Norsworthy.
Down here and use this microphone. Good afternoon, everybody on Zoom and here. Thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, who is Mandisa Thomas. She's here somewhere. Actually, she, I believe, is in Atlanta. And through the miracle of Zoom, she is going to be with us today. We're very happy to have her because she really is a leader of the free thought movement in the country. Has done great work with her organization that she founded, Black Nonbelievers, but she is very involved with the entire free thought movement. She has been on the board of several organizations. In fact, that's where I first met her when we were both on the Secular Coalition for America board at that time. And so I got to know her and see what a dynamic person she is. It really is also an aspect of herself that has been recognized by many other organizations, including the UU Humanist Group, which named her their Person of the Year in 2018. So she is well known in UU circles and throughout the free thought movement. So I would like to now just turn it over to Mandisa. She'll talk for a little while, and then we'll have time for questions. As I said, if you're here in the room and you'd like to make a comment or a question, just come down here and try to keep them brief, if you would. And the people on Zoom, we're going to alternate between Zoom and in the room. And the voice of God is up there. Where's the voice of God? The voice of God is turned off right now. Okay, so anyway, David Fike is going to be the voice of God, reading the questions from Zoom. And Jeremy is up there in the booth. Thank you, Jeremy, for being here today to help us with this technology. And to all of you on Zoom and here in the room, please forgive us if we don't get it all right. This is all kind of an experiment that we're doing, and it should work well, but just be patient if it doesn't. So with that, I will turn it over to Mandisa Thomas. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Bill, and thank you to the UU group of Clearwater. I really appreciate you inviting me to talk this afternoon. I'm currently at the American Atheist Convention here in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I do live. But it has just been an amazing weekend, and also really does confirm the need for my organization, Black Nonbelievers. So, and that is the title of my presentation is called Fear of a Black Atheist, how religion cripples the Black community. And in that, I will be speaking about my organization and the work we do, as well as things that the UU communities and secular communities can do to help support racial justice work, as well as the work of Black nonbelievers. So I'm going to share my screen right now. I always love to tell the story of the title of the talk. About 2017 is when I started doing this one, and it never fails to be relevant. And I was on a mini tour in the Northern California area between Sacramento and the Bay Area. And one of the professors at Sacramento City College at the time, and I think he's still there, his name is Don Button, we were going over appropriate titles for this talk. And he presented me with 5 of them. And the last one was Fear of a Black Atheist. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are into, I don't like to assume, so I like to ask, how many of you are familiar with the rap group Public Enemy? So yeah, yes, good, yes. So, for those of you who aren't aware, they were a very socially, politically conscious rap group back in the 1980s. And they produced an album called Fear of a Black Planet. And being a hip hop aficionado, and apparently so was the professor, I thought the title was just so great, but we thought it might be too provocative. But then once I ran it over with one of my friends, she said, you have to use that. And it has really been, it takes on a few meanings, because from one of my slides that was posted on Twitter from my presentation yesterday, the responses from some of the people have been so vitriolic and basically prove my point about white supremacy in the secular community. So it seems to be a fear of a Black atheist, as well as a fear of a Black planet. So it really does have significant and dual meanings, but in the context of how we are navigating these spaces in Black communities, as well as challenging those religious beliefs, it is just very, very apropos to this presentation. So getting into a little bit more about myself, like Bill said, I am the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers Incorporated, which is headquartered in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And I am a New York City native. I have been in Georgia for close to about over 25 years now. But New York will always be my home. I actually had a pretty non-religious upbringing. My parents, especially my mother, decided that she did not want my brothers and I being raised in church. And my father, who passed away on February 25th of this year, was made to go to church when he was, when he was younger, and he hated it. He absolutely hated religion and the church. And so as an adult, he did not go unless it was for special occasions. So I consider myself fortunate to have had that upbringing, which did not include religious indoctrination. Now, there are other forms of indoctrination beyond religion, but certainly, and I've had to unpack that during my years of being an activist. But when it came to religious indoctrination, I did not. I consider myself somewhat spared from that. Even though I actually performed in various churches in the Queens area with my voice instructor. And it was through that experience that really, really started to make me question religion and religious beliefs. and to have a critical view of them. So I transitioned to full-time activism in 2018. At the time that Black Nonbelievers was founded, I was working full-time as the event services manager at the Centers for Disease Control's Conference Center at their primary campus, right next to Emory University here in Atlanta. But as time went on and the need for my work in this community was realized, I stepped away from that position and I resigned from my position to become a full-time activist in the secular community. And just below my picture is a way that you can help support my activism on a personal level. I have a Patreon that you can support for as little as $1 per month if you are so inclined. In addition, I do currently serve on the boards for American Atheists and the American Humanist Association, and previously for the Secular Coalition for America, like Bill said, and Foundation Beyond Belief, as well as the 2016 Reason Rally Coalition. I also serve on the board for an organization called Humanist Global Charity that is headed by Phil Zuckerman, in case you are familiar with him. In addition to the, so I was the recipient of the UU Humanist Association's Person of the Year in 2018. The Secular Student Alliance's Backbone Award in 2019, along with the Free Thought Heroine Award from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I am also the co-recipient of the 2020 Harvard Humanist of the Year Award, along with Sekifu Hutchinson and Ijoma Oluo. We were the first Black women to receive this honor. And most recently, I was the recipient of the 2020 Irving and Annabelle Wilson Award, which is presented by the UU Church of Worcester, Massachusetts. And they have been presenting this award. This is the 7th year that they've presented it. And I am the first person of color to ever receive that award. So it is very, very, it's good to receive the acknowledgement, although that isn't why I'm in this community, but it is nice when the acknowledgement comes because it is a lot of work. And I'm also a certified humanist celebrant, which means I can perform community services, weddings, funerals or memorials, naming ceremonies, and the like. So if you know of anyone that is getting married and is looking for a humanist celebrant, please do feel free to send them my way. I'm pretty sure in your communities and your congregations, there are probably celebrants as well. But if they are looking specifically for a humanist celebrant and would like to have me do it, then I'd be more than happy to. So enough about me. I'm here to talk about Black atheists and how we do exist, and not just Black atheists, Black folks who are questioning their religious beliefs in favor of leaving, and also those who, even if they are still religious, they are more progressive than many of their counterparts. But I showed these two pictures in particular because if you are a subscriber to the Humanist magazine, and if you are a member of the American Humanist Association, which I hope you all are, then you may have received the July-August 2018 issue with the 5 Fierce Humanists that included myself and 4 of the Black women. And this was the first time in the now over 80-year existence of that publication, with the exception of Alice Walker, who was featured on the cover. We were the first group of Black women who were featured on the cover of that magazine. And that was also the same year and month that the Playboy issue was released. And there was an article on the American Atheist Convention that year. And there was a former pastor who was a writer, and part of the article that was released or produced says the most encouraging moment of the American Atheist Convention weekend comes when I introduced myself to Mandisa Thomas, founder and president of Black Nonbelievers. Now, some of you may be wondering, why is there a need for an organization like Black Nonbelievers? If you are on Twitter, which sometimes I highly recommend that you don't, go on there, because it can be so negative and toxic depending on what you're seeing. But there is often a question of why does there need to be an organization called Black Nonbelievers? That is partially because there are still people who think that Black atheists and other atheists of color do not exist. But in order to fully understand, we must start with why religion defines the Black community, because it does. And approximately 79% of the Black community still identifies as religious, and which is down from 87% 10 years ago. But considering that the Black population in the United States is still only at about 12%, 79% is very, very high. And the reason for this also is because slavery in the United States particularly forced the African captives and basically the enslaved Africans and their descendants to accept Christianity. If you remember, the papal bull from the Catholic Church basically decreed that the Africans would be perpetually enslaved, meaning that I'm not supposed to be sitting here as a free individual. That was not the intention back then, and that it was ordained by God. And so there were passages from the Bible used to justify the enslavement and trafficking of the African captives. And that is important to fully understand. And also the Black church became a primary support system for slavery. Became a primary support system for the Black community once slavery and also the Reconstruction period ended, and institutionalized racism was enacted and enforced. Now, when we talk about, when there's a question about critical race theory, which is only at this time taught on the college level, we can think to laws like the Jim Crow, the Jim Crow laws, which were put into place to effectively disfranchise Black people, especially in the South, where Blacks were not allowed to go into certain areas. They had businesses destroyed and taken away from them. There were opportunities denied them based on the law, which was based on the notions that Blacks are inferior. And this has been etched into our institutional fabric of our society, and how these racist practices have determined how Black folks are treated in the criminal justice system, how we tend to be overlooked in certain professions, how we are only supposed to be in a certain profession, certainly not in a higher sphere that is normally dominated by white people. So having a better understanding of the laws in this country and the establishment of the race classification, which was ultimately designed to keep Black folks on the bottom, which also sadly informed or indoctrinated folks on this idea that Black folks are inferior. So even if you wouldn't outright say it, because of the systems that were put in place, there is a fundamental reason why there is an economic disadvantage, why there are health disadvantages and other disadvantages from the Black community. Of course, that doesn't mean that we haven't persevered or resisted through that, but it is good to understand why those foundational factors matter. And the Black church was a community and safety support for many Black folks when there was very little to nothing else in their communities. It provided a sense of power, a sense of comfort and support, and it was also good for organizing in many ways. And you see this in the civil rights movement to an extent. So we have to better understand why religion defines the Black community, because even though that's changing in a lot of ways, it still does. but in acknowledging the role that the Black church and played in Black communities. And you can go to Pew Research to look up the studies that they did last year in 2021, which shows the numbers of the Black participants who participated in the study. But we also have to talk about how religion has crippled the Black community. And I really do say crippled because in a lot of ways it is very true. The religion, Christianity in particular, and the church has indeed hijacked the image of the Black community historically and currently. And I always point to the reference of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Now, how many of you are familiar? I can't see everyone right now because I know that my, you can raise your hand if you can. If you are familiar with Carter G. Woodson, or if you aren't, he was an African-American historian back during the Harlem Renaissance. He was a Harvard graduate. He famously wrote the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, which has a lot of good points that are still relevant today. And he was the founder of Negro History Week, which turned into Black History Month in the 1970s. And this information is important because the foundation of one of the most important months in our calendar year was started by a free thinker, someone who challenged the institution of the church, yet that information is largely obscured. It also ignores how Blacks became predominantly Christian in the United States. Certainly looking to the God concept and how damaging it ultimately has been, even though the church buildings were, and the people were good support systems, the doctrine is still pretty horrendous. And it severely diminished the critical thinking process and also reinforces dependence on a savior. There is just this notion that God has brought us or the Black community through all of the suffering and all the challenges. And that just simply is not true. There are a number of people who believed in God, who through their humanitarianism really decided that, that the mistreatment of human beings was wrong. And that also includes many non-religious people. And religion does exacerbate and perpetuates systems of homophobia, sexism, hypocrisy, etc. Overlooks abusive actions that are committed by religious people and leaders. We can certainly look to the Catholic Church, and also we can look to the late Bishop Eddie Long, who died back in 2017, who was carrying on what is inappropriate relations with some of the young male members of his church, while simultaneously denouncing same-sex marriage and same-gender loving relationships. It takes money from the community, but does not sufficiently give it back. This is with the advent of the prosperity gospel, which basically states the more you give to your church, the more your blessings come down. But some people give to these churches to their own financial peril, while the leaders are living well beyond their means. And it also keeps people in fear and isolation and from seeking help and solutions that are needed. It has only been recently that the church, and the Black church in particular, has started addressing mental health and mental health awareness, as well as awareness about overall health. And in addition to that, this notion that that Black folks who are atheists are still, even though we're still smaller in number, there is a notion for many Black communities that even though there's critique of the church, there has been a reluctance to let go of the God concept. And it goes deeper within our communities because you're often seen as not just rejecting the concept of God, it's also seen as you're rejecting your identity as being Black. Now, of course, the label, of course, the Black identity comes from comes from a racist classification in the United States. However, it is an identity that many people feel strongly about. And this does play because of the emotional attachment to the church. It really becomes a difficult conversation to have, and therefore there are higher levels of concealment among Black folks, especially Black atheists in our communities. But this is what Black Nonbelievers seeks to rectify, and also in moving the conversation forward. For those of you who aren't aware, we got started in 2011 in Atlanta, simply as Black Nonbelievers of Atlanta. We shortened our name to Black Nonbelievers because there was interest in starting affiliate groups in different cities. And so this is just a small example of the work that we do, and also the initiatives that we have been involved in. We have been featured. We have had major media coverage. We've also contributed to research for certain for books. We have participated in interfaith dialogue, for example, with the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty. And we have participated in protests and marches, particularly the Black Women's March in Washington, D.C., and that is Roger, who is our affiliate organizer up there. We also produce and co-produce our own events, for example, the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference and BNC-Con, which I will discuss more later. We also have other programming. We do try to meet regularly. Of course, with the pandemic, we are doing a mixture of both in-person and virtual events. But we launched our first Billboard campaign on our own last year with the assistance of the Steeple Free Thought Foundation, who sponsored it. The slogan for, or the phrase for the campaign, which we have now turned into bumper stickers, is "Free yourself from religion and find true liberation." We also co-sponsor the Hurston Scholarship with the Secular Student Alliance. And we have an ongoing Being Changes Lives campaign where our members and allies can share their experiences of being a part of our organization and how it has truly helped change their lives as well as saved them. So the question becomes, are you truly an ally or an accomplice? So there are the things that you can do, but there are some things that I like to start off with that you shouldn't do. First, please don't assume you can't help. Just because we are an organization that centers the voices of Black people, it doesn't mean that you cannot help in any way. Don't assume that we care about the same things or even look alike. That is actually a function of white supremacy, assuming that all people of color agree on the same things. That has never been the case. And if you look at the intellectual thoughts and then the discourse between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, for example, you can see that. Don't dismiss the importance of our groups. When we're talking about marginalized people and groups that are at a tactical disadvantage due to those historical factors, the need for organizations like Black Nonbelievers is important. Don't become defensive when we discuss our concerns. And this was an extreme example of that again this weekend. There was a slide from my presentation shared, and there are so many people who are up in arms, calling it racist, saying that I am encouraging people to ignore research and data and such, which is not true at all. And it's mostly white people, particularly white men, that are doing that. Please don't say I don't see color or race, because you basically ignore racism, and especially institutionally, and its problematic role in how Black people have been treated, other marginalized groups have been treated, and usually it is wrapped up in these Christian ideals, which has now been called, labeled as Christian nationalism. It has been a huge component to historic racism, and also these and how like I said, how Black people have been treated. So when you say you don't see color or race, we understand that yes, race is a social construct. It's a racist construct, really. But when you say that, and you're saying this in a group where there are predominantly white people and you barely see any people of color there, that also could imply that you don't care and you really don't want to do that. So with that being said, do open yourself to listening and learning. Also adjusting your attitudes and actions when presented with new information. Do check and redirect any problematic members and or leaders and remove them if necessary. There are still a number of people in our communities who think that Black Lives Matter is just such a horrific statement. It's probably one of the worst things that anyone could have come up with. And if you see any of your peers and leaders mistreating anyone, but particularly people of color, please do speak up, check them, and if there is an opportunity to remove them from leadership or even your groups, especially if they are being disruptive, then don't be afraid to do it. Do implement diverse programming and leadership into your organization. It really does matter when you have more young people, when you have more people of color, when it comes to your programming and just doing events and putting on your programming overall. You begin to see a shift in, you can begin to see a shift in the people who participate, as well as, the future support you may receive. And do collaborate and participate with other groups and organizations. And also give Black, Indigenous, people of color space when needed. And that acronym is BIPOC. And that is, it refers to Black, Indigenous, people of color. Sometimes we don't always want to be inundated with questions about institutional racism and injustice. We are trying to live our lives like many of you, but we are not always here to answer. We are not always here to answer questions that pertain to racial justice and what the Black community is. So when there is space needed for us, please do remember to give it. And that's when, it doesn't mean it's all the time. Again, give the space we need it. Also, do have information and resources available for people. Now that you know about Black Nonbelievers, if you know someone who is interested in our organization, it is good to have that information available for them. And it's also good for, diversifying your materials for your organization, as well as helping to build better branding and also better, position statements. And last but not least, do donate and support. Just like your organization, Black Nonbelievers is a 501c3 organization, and donations to us are tax deductible, and we certainly need them for our programming and the work that we do. I have one of my new favorite groups is called Moonchild. They are a neo-soul R&B group, and the majority of the group is white. It's a trio. They're an amazing group. I highly do recommend that you check out their music if you can, but they make a very impactful, they are very, very big on amplifying the voices of Black women, Black people, people of color, and they encourage folks to support them. They have a very simple model of spend your privilege. And I don't like to harp on, just the whole white privilege thing, even though a lot of, there is a lot to be said about it. But it must be recognized that if you are serious about supporting the efforts, especially of Black folks in this movement, as well as the things that are important or that are very, very relevant to our lives, in addition to state-church separation, it is important to spend your privilege and donate and support in any way that you can. So here are a few references and resources. The Black Non-Religious Americans report that was released jointly with American Atheists last year. It is a part of the U.S. Secular Survey that was released in 2019. And I'm sorry, I just saw something very important there. And the information is available online. Also, the book Humanists in the Hood, Unapologetically Black, Feminist, and Heretical, which is written by Sakibu Hutchinson, one of the five fierce humanists and the co-recipients of the Harvard Humanist of the Year Award. Also, Black Freethinkers, A History of African-American Secularism by Christopher Cameron, Confessions of a Black Atheist, which I wrote for CNN in 2015, as well as the documentary Contradiction, A Question of Faith, that was produced by Jeremiah Kamara, who is also a resident of the Atlanta, Georgia area. So in conclusion, I would like to say that this is a quote from one of our members. It reads, "Before seeing that video of you on YouTube, I thought I was the only Black person who did not believe in God. I then logged on to Facebook and found your organization, Black Nonbelievers Incorporated. The joy I felt seeing and meeting so many Black people who were skeptical or outright didn't believe. Thank you once again for being an inspiration and bringing atheism and secularism in the Black community. It is needed." And our hashtag is BN Changes Lives, because we don't just try to change the lives of those who have left religion. We are also ushering in new information and a new generation. And I'm very, very proud to say that our work is now being included in a number of ways within the National Museum for African American Culture. They are noticing the decline in religious affiliation in Black communities. And they're wanting to hear more from those of us who are not religious at all. And it's important that the larger UU community and the secular community support our efforts, because it is important to all of us, and we can help alleviate that fear that so many people have. And the fear that I am most concerned with are those who are still scared to come out and who are still scared to, to express this to their families, because they need the most support. And with that, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to Black Nonbelievers on social media. We are on Facebook at Black Nonbelievers, at Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, where we launched a show in January called In the Cut. And we have featured a number of special guests there. We actually just went live yesterday from the convention to talk with folks here. And of course, we also encourage you to donate and support our work directly through our website. We are also on Cash App. You can support us through Amazon Smile, and if your place of employment has a workplace giving program, or if you have a charitable giving fund, you can support us that way too. And our upcoming events are the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference this year from September 30th through October 2nd. It is come one, come all. There will be an online streaming option, and you will hear from women of color in this movement who are doing some fantastic work. If you can come to Chicago, we do highly encourage that you do. It is a joint production of Black Nonbelievers, the Black Skeptics Group, and the Women's Leadership Project. Those two organizations are based out of Los Angeles. And we also we are going back on the cruise again, BNC-Con. We will be on the Carnival Spirit from November 27th through December 3rd, but we do have a pre-cruise event that will take place on November 26th. And we have a number of speakers that will be there, and we highly recommend that that if you are interested, please support, or if you would just like to just spread the word for us, that would be great too. And I encourage people to come and see and experience the beaten difference. It really does help, and it really does make a difference when there are definitely a number of varied voices in our communities. And those of us who are coming from positions that are very much important to our communities that we should be paying attention to and be aware of, and be the example of how to and how to change. Thank you very much. And now we have time for questions.
Thank you. Mandisa, that was great. As I said before the talk, we are going to now have some time, about 15 minutes or so, for question and answer. If you'd like to say something, come on up to the microphone. We'll alternate between in-person and Zoom. And so come on down, and David is going to be the voice of the questioners that send in their comments by chat. So if you're on Zoom, please just put your question in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. But Richard, before you start, if you could, if you don't mind, I'll take a little privilege here and have a question about the issue of alliances, especially in the Tampa Bay area, which I'm most familiar with. I think most of you realize that we are part of the Coalition for Reason. Our UU Humanist group is a member of that. And there are about 8 or 9 groups in the Tampa Bay area. And I don't think any of those have any Black members. And it has been something that we have talked about many times, but how to attract people who need us, who don't know about us. I realize that's part of the problem, but do you have any thoughts and ways that you could recommend that we could reach out to this free thought community of Black and other people of color? So that's my question.
Yes, so there are many ways that you can reach out, and I've noticed that has been a recurring question. I do encourage each and every group to reconsider or to think about what the activities that you already do, and also how you are currently marketing your yourselves to people of color and other Black folks. The types of events that you may show up for or don't. That is something to reconsider. I think that it is, it's going to be a challenge at times to recruit more people especially if there is a thought process of doing what you always done and then expecting the same results. So it will take some further engagement simply beyond your building, or just simply beyond the secular spaces, which may be uncomfortable. So of course, now that Juneteenth is a national holiday, I do think that it is a great opportunity to engage on issues that are very similar, that we have common ground with. And you may find that you may pull in some people. I'm not sure if you've ever had people attend your events and then they just don't come back. Sometimes life happens, but at the same time, if you want to retain those people, if you want to retain more people of color, it's important that if there are suggestions, that they make you take them seriously. And because it has to start, it has to be a part of the culture of your organization or your group, that you prioritize Black voices, and that you start reviewing your materials and how they may be coming across and not necessarily in a good way. Not that that's intentional, but it is important that with all of this new information, that that the marketing has to change. So that is very, very important. So that may take reaching out and just perhaps and also participating, like I said earlier, with other groups you may not know who, or with other entities and organizations. You never know who you may pull in out, that way. It definitely is going to, and it needs to be consistent. They can't be one-time efforts that even if you don't get something, if you don't get something one time, then we understand that. But at the same time, it's like, you have to reconsider that. So I hope that helped. I hope I wasn't rambling on, but engaging in more outreach is going to be really important.
Indeed, I agree with that. Thank you. Richard, why don't you come up to this mic right here?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask you a question. If
Sure.
Martin Luther King were alive today, what do you think his views would be towards Black non-believers? And also, I would like to get your views of Martin Luther King.
Well, it's very important. It's very interesting that his name is invoked. I do a talk on Dr. King. I think it's important for people to understand that he was much more than the "I have a dream" speech. He was much more than just simply a reverend. So for those of you who aren't familiar with him, he actually was going to be a Unitarian Universalist minister before he became a Baptist minister. Before it was determined that that was the best path for the civil rights movement. What I think of him as, he was very pluralistic. He was very much that. I mean, he certainly had his flaws as an individual, but he was very, very progressive for his time. And I can certainly appreciate that about him as a person and his legacy. What I think he may think about us is interesting, because if you read his letter from a Birmingham jail that was written in 1963 to his white Christian counterparts who felt like he was being too radical, he acknowledged that there were Black nationalist movements out there, and that they were moving the needle. They weren't necessarily waiting for, they weren't necessarily moving in peacefully. So he acknowledged that those groups were out there. And also towards the end of his life, he was becoming more radical. His religious counterparts, especially the Black religious counterparts, they didn't like him going to Memphis to get involved with the Poor People's marches. They thought that he should stay on that ivory tower and just start preaching and keep preaching from there. And that's something that he didn't do. So he was becoming more grassroots towards the end of his life. So this is an example of what I think more people could be doing. I think that he might be interested in hearing what we have to say, considering that A. Philip Randolph, who was a humanist, was the key organizer for the March on Washington and worked closely with Dr. King, as well as Bayard Rustin, who was a gay man, even though he technically identified as a Quaker. But that was written out of the history books for a very long time. So I think that he might be very interested and maybe even willing to work with us at some point.
Okay, thank you. David, any questions from the chat?
Actually, there aren't right now. None have been typed in.
Okay. Okay, you Zoom people, wake up. Mark, you have a question or comment?
I'd just like to know how many chapters you have, or is it just one organization with folks around the country who have joined? and whether is a chapter in the Tampa Bay area with whom we could do some joint projects and ventures.
So we have multiple affiliates across the country. We have affiliates in New York City, Washington, D.C., Charlotte, North Carolina, Detroit, Michigan, and Portland, Oregon, and Richmond, Virginia. Now, we used to have an Orlando group, which we may revive after this convention because there's been interest. Again, there has been nothing specifically in the Tampa Bay area yet, but like most groups and organizations, we come across people who are initially excited and interested, enthused, et cetera. And then either life happens or, they're not, they got kind of gotten over their heads with organizing, or maybe they felt like this wasn't important to them as much as, as much as it once was. So we have the same challenges that most groups have in trying to retain members as well as leadership, especially volunteer groups. So hopefully we can revive the Orlando group, which I know is about an hour or so away from Tampa. And hopefully we can get some more affiliates going in the future.
On that point of starting chapters, how many people would you think are necessary to have as a minimum to start a chapter that could be viable?
Sure. I think a group can start with as little as 5 people, 5 to 10 people, and at least 2 organizers, because that piece is necessary to have more than one person in a position of leadership. But a group of 10 people is enough to get something going, in my opinion.
So we have about 120,000 Black people in Pinellas County. We ought to be able to find 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could you come down here and help us?
Well, that depends on the time that I have, and I'm not sure that I have that, but we do have a large online presence. We have been able to help establish affiliate groups with people that we met online. And, I think it's a matter of, again, continuing to push that, continue to be consistent. It's hard work, but, we should hopefully get there. You have to remember too, that there are a number of Black folks who are feeling so alone that it just isn't even in their purview to consider that there are others. I spoke with one young lady here at the convention this weekend, and she said she's done a lot of work online. She's done stuff online, but she's felt so alone for so long that it didn't even register to her that there was a community. And with the impact of religion on Black communities in particular, it may take some time to get folks involved. And we have a thing with our, with our social networking already, but if you can try to imagine people who have felt so isolated for so long, it may be challenging for them to even think about what it means to find a community once they leave the church. So it's going to take some time and patience for sure.
Anybody else? Yeah. Welcome back, by the way.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for presenting your program. And my name is Stan McFarland. I'm 93 years old, and I'm very discouraged at this point in my life. There are 2 areas that I wanted to ask you about. First of all, I know how important the church, Black church, has been to the culture and the sense of well-being for Black people, but I sense that they've almost given up any hope of trying to achieve some meaningful equality and fairness in the system. And I don't mean that in in a derogatory way, but so many times I've approached people about voting and so on, and they fall back and they say, oh, I can't make a difference. I just trust in God, and we have to trust in God. And I think there ought to be some way we could persuade them that we can, that even through the church, that they've got to get more involved and seize back some of the power they're losing. This concept of going backwards with the voting rights is deplorable, and I wonder what your thoughts are on that subject.
Well, it's very layered, and it's a it's a good question, because there are still many people, especially in smaller towns, who don't think that voting or participating in the political process matters, or all they're going to do is just simply follow what their pastor tells them to. This is a part of the indoctrination and the conditioning of religious thinking. And at times it can be very, very, it can be a very daunting task. But I do think there is a way, perhaps, if we can help people better understand how state church separation activism impacts Black communities directly when it comes to policy making decisions, especially as Black women in particular are at higher risks health-wise. It is important to make those correlations and to better help understand how religion has kind of sort of exacerbated that. But when we look at some of these, and I know that for some of them, they look at some of these other churches and they think, well, that's not us. But ultimately, the doctrine itself can be subtle in causing harm, and it may take some time to really turn that around. But when we can, if we can at least even get a few people to to listen and understand better, then we're doing what we're doing what we set out to do. So it is important also to continue to support the national organizations that are doing this work. I know that the wider UU organization has definitely become more aware and active. And there are some churches that are starting to become more aware and active too. It's not going to be an overnight process, but it is something that I think is possible, even though it may seem like it's not.
Okay, I think we're probably just about at the end of our time here. David, any questions on the chat?
Just one. Harriet says that she thinks of the city of Petersburg longstanding tradition of celebrating Juneteenth. She thinks that a humanist presence at the celebration would go a long way toward attracting people of color, and didn't know what Ms. Thomas thinks.
I mean, I think that is, I mentioned Juneteenth. I think it would be a very good idea for your humanist organizations to have a table there to spread information. And if you need some information on Black nonbelievers and how to find us, I can certainly send them. I know I still have your information, Mark, so I can send brochures to you about Black nonbelievers to hand out to folks.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Mandisa, wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Good to see you again.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so Mark has one more thing to say, and then we'll be adjourned.
Yeah, I forgot to ask the people on Zoom to consider a donation also, and you can do that by mailing a check to UUC for whatever amount you feel is appropriate. In the lower left-hand corner, just put UU Humanists in the memo section and mail it to the mailing address, which is 2470 Nursery Road in Clearwater, and I think the zip is 33764. So we appreciate it. We'll continue to try and have good programs like we've had today. Thank you.
And we do hope to have another meeting in the next month or so. So stay tuned. We'll be in touch. Thank you all for being here.